right. Good morning again. Glad to see everybody here. If you wouldn't mind putting into the chat where you're logging in from and what your teaching position is, that we would love to know more about you. Welcome to our Reading League book study on the next steps in literacy instruction. We are going to discuss chapters 3 and 4 today. Jam-packed, fascinating chapters. Very well done. Okay. And that one for my chat. There we go. Welcome, Carrie and Julie, Rachel from California. Wow, wonderful. Kim from New Jersey. Fantastic. Thanks for joining in from far away. Meryl, welcome on my Meryl, my season 9 peeps. Chalk Fest in Wausau. Has it started? Has Chalk Fest started, Lori? You just plop down somewhere on the 400 block watching the chalk go, and that's dedication, my friend. Dedication.
My husband and daughter is actually doing it.
Oh, very cool. Very
yeah.
cool. Welcome from Medford, Wisconsin, and Greenfield. Excellent. Welcome, Chris. Another CISA colleague. Atlanta, Georgia. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, keep clocking it in, and we're going to go ahead and begin. So this week we are discussing chapters 3 and 4. And then next week will be chapter 5. And after that, chapter 6. After that, every chapter gets its own day. So we should have done that for chapters 3 and 4 as well. So we hope you can continue to join us throughout the month of July and into the first week of August. These are the 4 learning targets that we put together for today's session. There could have been several, but I tried to create 4 that encompass the big ideas. The first one is I will understand new insights about effective phonemic awareness instruction.
Oh, Amy, do you need to share your screen?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to back up. I have a new configuration on my computer, so. All right, we'll just back up to the dates so you can all see when we are going to be back in session. Next week, we're skipping the 4th of July, and then July 12th will be the next one for chapter 5, chapter 6, the 19th, chapter 7, the 26th, and August 2nd for chapter 8. Okay, and here are our learning targets again. So I will understand new insights about phonemic awareness instruction. And I did initially have embrace, but I'm hoping you'll embrace the new insights. They are definitely reflective of the latest thinking about phonemic awareness. And then number 2, I will understand the logical instructional progressions of phonemic awareness skills and how to assess them. Number 3, I'll gain insights on how to leverage Aries phases of word reading to inform assessment and instructional decisions. And then number 4, I'll identify practices that will work for my teaching context. All right, so without further ado, the summary for chapter 3 was pretty intense. So as you read chapter 3, there was new insight on changing the term phonological awareness to phonological sensitivity and the rationale for that. Also, traditional, oops, sorry for the error.
Amy, can I interrupt you for a minute? Can you make your screen full?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yep. I just have to move a few other things around. All right, how's that working? Better? Okay, thanks. So phonological awareness, phonological sensitivity, replacing the term phonological awareness. Traditionally, we spent a lot of time teaching syllable onset rhyme, and the new learning is that we don't have to master those skills. We just need to create some sensitivity to them as we move right into phoneme awareness, because that's where the meat's at. Yes, we are skipping the 5th. Thank you, Marlene, for your question. It's more productive to teach phonemic awareness alongside letter names and handwriting practice. I'm really interested in what your thoughts are on that. This combined instruction, and if you've heard Nell Thompson talk about this, and there's been a couple of speakers on this, that it takes longer for kids to acquire the handwriting component, but that the cost benefit of combining the letter name, the letter sound, and the phoneme, it's worth, in this case, the juice is worth the squeeze. You really do want to push for that because it's creating those brain pathways that get kids where we want them to go faster with establishing the alphabetic principle. Third insight, use spelling to gain insights about phoneme awareness, especially with older students. And basically, is there a grapheme for every phoneme represented? And what did they choose? So wonderful insights can be gained really from all age kids, but especially from our older kids, grades 3 and above, on their phoneme awareness. I'm going to actually pause there and see if there's anything anybody wants to respond to, these 3 big summary bullets. We do have some discussion questions, but I'll open it now first. Any thoughts you want to dive in on? You only see the presenter? Uh-oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Let me just, I'm on a roll today. Hang on one second.
Amy, I can see your presentation.
Can you? You can just see the one with chapters 3 and 4? Like that's
Oh,
perfect.
mhm.
Okay, good. You shouldn't see my presenter notes. Okay, excellent. All right, I'm going to move forward because we do have discussion questions. So here's additional summary information from chapter 3. Blending is needed for decoding. Segmenting is needed for encoding. She doesn't say that explicitly, but that is what comes out of pages 59 and 60. And blending tends to be the easier skill for students to learn because we're starting. I don't know. I sometimes disagree with that, but I think that's because my experience is more with struggling readers, so they can sound it out, but putting it back together seems to be a challenge. Segmenting, on the other hand, you start with the whole word and you're peeling down the phonemes. And because you're starting with the whole word, sometimes that seems a little more logical to me. But research suggests blending is easier for kids to learn than segmenting. Continuant versus stop sounds, that got some attention on page 61. And there's also an appendix that shows all the phonemes laid out with some motions that you can teach. I'll just put in a plug for visual phonics here. If you haven't had visual phonics training, that's probably the most ideal hand signal to teach with the phonemes because it was specifically created to adapt American Sign Language to all the phonemes in English beyond the 44, the R control vowels, and some other interesting, because it was made for deaf kids. And how do you help deaf children understand the phonemes in English? You have to be really explicit. So if you are interested in that, I highly recommend that as an avenue for teaching the hand signal that could go with the sounds. The other big message around the continuant versus stop is that in your instruction, you want to teach beginning with the continuous sounds first because you can hold on to them, the this, and so on. 60 and 61 had information on just that continuum of PA development. And again, if we're jumping right to the phoneme level, notice that we don't have syllable on here. We don't have onset rhyme. We're just isolating the initial phoneme that comes first. And then kids hear the final phoneme. And then we chase after the medial phoneme in single syllable consonant vowel consonant words or vowel consonant words. The continuum then moves into identifying more complex syllable blends, like in one consonant words where you have the initial blend, skip, or the final blend and desk, so on. So that's one syllable slightly more complex. And then we get the most complex single syllable that has blends on both ends, and sometimes three-letter blends, three-sound blends. Like in street, for example, has a three-sound blend, the STR. Those would be more complex. So this progression of skills is, and again, chasing after the initial phoneme first, and then the final phoneme and medial, and then moving through the words with the blends is generally the pathway that we want to take. And there's some great assessment details on page 63 for first sound fluency and phoneme segmentation, as well as a variety of phonemic awareness surveys. And there's one included in the book as well in the appendix. Fantastic activities on pages 71 and 81 through 81. Chapter 4. And again, we're going to discuss chapter 3 in just a moment. Chapter 4 is big understandings were on orthographic mapping as the superhighway for instant automatic word recognition. Remember that in orthographic mapping, that's a process that happens, as Kilpatrick likes to say, behind the scenes. And it's that place in the brain, that visual word form area that's formed after we've had enough repetition and practice on the phonemes and letters and how to combine them. Then we can instantly and automatically recognize word parts as well as sounds. Visual phonics is a training. It's not necessarily a program. It's a training that is, every state has some certified visual phonics trainers, and that's, not everybody can learn it. You have to go through a big training process. So if you Google "see the sounds" and or visual phonics, you'll come to that, and then your state. You should help you identify who can do that in your state. And for those of you in Wisconsin, I have connections for that. Yeah, thank you, Jeanette. Okay, jumping back into chapter 4, Aries phases of word recognition development and the wave image on page 86. And really, I'd seen that before in top 10 tools, and then reading it again, because of course that Blazer is one of the co-authors of this book. Her wave image is included, and it really does help you see that it's not they're not finite edges to each of these. They can overlap as kids move through these phases, and we can identify specific subtests that can give us insights into where the kids are for the phases that are presented. So pre-alphabetic, we can use letter name fluency, and or we can use the letter name assessment that she has in the book on page 92 to help us recognize how many letters the kids can name. Early alphabetic, page 89, we know some letters, we have some phonemic awareness, but it's sketchy how much we know. And that's where nonsense word fluency is really a powerful tool, because of the progression that kids can do with saying just the sounds, saying the sounds and then recoding it to say the word. Or are we moving into that full alphabetic stage where they're looking at the nonsense word and able to recognize it as a unit and read it as a word? So that moves us into that full alphabetic where kids are now solidly blending and segmenting. And those are the two phonemic awareness skills that must be mastered to become readers. And so by the time they're in the full alphabetic stage, they have mastered blending and segmenting. And they've learned quite a few graphemes as well that spell phonemes. They're still learning, but they've learned enough that they have some automaticity with certain words. And we can use a phonics survey to help us know where we need to target our instruction and inventory, if you will. By the time they get to the consolidated phase, they are reading pretty well, right? This is where spelling is mostly regular, mostly correct. Their fluency is intact for the grade level that they're in. They're reading with reasonable accuracy and understanding. This is that consolidated phase. Their sight word vocabulary is activated because, going back to the concept of orthographic mapping, by the time they make it to the consolidated phase, that visual word form area has some stuff in it. Now they can look at a word and they can instantly say it. But it takes us moving through all those other phases in order for kids to acquire the skills necessary, which is kind of an insight into the way we used to teach reading, where we were pressuring kids to learn. And maybe some of you are still in this, where your district administrators are saying, listen, the kids have to master 150 high frequency words by the end of kindergarten. Well, that's making us think that kids are in that consolidated phase when they've just memorized themselves uh, through some words and they skipped all of these other phases. And then by the time they get to second and third grade, that stops working and we're in trouble. So we need to move through these phases through high quality instruction and use our assessments to inform that. So my summary page for 3 and 4 really is capturing the big assessments, which I've got listed here in the top bullet. Appendix A, page 240, has her quick reveal phoneme awareness tool. So if you don't have a reliable phonemic awareness assessment, they've given us a nice one. Page 63 has phonemic awareness from universal to phonemic to progress monitoring to some diagnostics. That letter name form on page 90. And then, of course, there's phonics surveys and phonics diagnostics listed as well, including the 6 syllable types, and their phonics survey are included. So they've given us 3 assessments, really 4 if you count the letter naming one, are included in this book alone. Those of you from Wisconsin, that's one of the reasons that we put this book onto the CISA assessment guidance document, because it is so helpful and it actually provides some things that we all need. The continuum chart we'll talk about in just a bit here. Scope and sequence example on page 113 for phonics. You can read down the rest. Really follows the progression, including those activities that we can use for teaching phonemic awareness, teaching phonics, and also small group activities. And then 2 fabulous lessons from Ms. Garcia and Mr. Chapman. One on phonemic awareness for kindergartners and one on phonics for second grade. And the thing I love about those lessons is they really demonstrate the I do, we do, you do, along with a little bit of review at the beginning to start the lesson off and the application and practice at the end with teacher wording. So if you're wondering, what does this look like in action? Say it out loud. Read through the script and say it out loud, and you can get a flavor for what solid, explicit, systematic, intensive instruction looks like. Okay, so here are our discussion questions. They are wordy. The first one, Smart and Glasser talk about how phonemic awareness instruction is most effective when we go beyond just oral practice and include things like letter naming and handwriting. Does that idea shift how you think about teaching phonemic awareness? What are some ways you already combine these elements, or could you see yourself trying to do? So let's open up the discussion here, and you can take us to any page of the book. What are your thoughts on that? And as Jeanette said, I have decent wait time as well, so we'll just pause and wait.
Well, Amy, hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
When you're talking about all these things, the word that comes to my mind is repetition. Because I keep thinking about the fact, like the students that I work with, the 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, they've been through these things, right? Many times, but something is not putting it into their letterbox. So that's the word that comes to my mind, is that repetition. And we may think that it's boring and that they have it, but we can't make that assumption because so many of our kids need it so many times before they can pattern that.
Yes. And she says the term over practice more than once in the chapters. Like, you have to over practice these skills. Even if you think they have them, they need continuous, intensive practice. Yes. Which is why combining the letter name with the sound and the handwriting is so effective, right?
Agree.
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Julie.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep, hi, Christine.
Hi there. Sorry, my dog is being very rambunctious, so I have my screen off. Um, One of the things that I thought with phonemic awareness, like that I learned, was that it was done in the dark. Like you didn't need to look at anything in order to teach phonemic awareness, and that's something that I've shifted from in the last few years to using letters, manipulating them, pointing to sounds as we're saying them. So that's something that's really shifted in my teaching practices.
Thanks, Christine. And that comes up in the chapter as well. We used to say, and I remember saying this in trainings, right? Only teach phonemic awareness in the dark. That's what makes it special. But really, you need to combine much sooner the phoneme and the phonics because you can't do phonics without phonemic awareness. It comes along for the ride. But then we're thinking about cognitive load. So doing some oral only work is important, especially for the kids Julie was mentioning when they're 7, 8, 9, and they're still not getting it. But did you notice somewhere in the chapters it says that the words you use for that oral only should also be the words that the kids are going to be reading, right? There's that nice tight connection between what we're saying and doing, blending and segmenting orally. And now, let's look at the print. Yeah, thanks.
And I'll just chime in a little bit about the handwriting. I've always been so much on handwriting, and to see this actually coming and to do the oral practice with the handwriting to get that pathway, to build that pathway. And I really am so big about handwriting that I love to see this and to read more about it.
Excellent. Yeah, agreed.
I was saying, Melissa, you stole my thunder because that's my big thing. If our kids can't make the letter, doesn't matter if they know the sound, they sit there looking at you going, I don't know how to make it. So we've got to make sure all those connections are happening and we're not just saying, oh yeah, that says yeah, I also have to know how do I write that to map it all the way through.
Right, because you think of that cognitive load that we talk about, and if they can't do their handwriting, that cognitive load is
It's too much.
exponentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to chime in. I'm a little busy today with the caregiving I have in my life, but I tend to use something called Explode the Code, but not the reading part. The get ready for the code, get set for the code, and go for the code. I'm having a difficult time trying to get my phone camera to send pictures of what they have in it, but they teach the writing of the letter, and they have different it's from that place in Harvard, EPS, Educators Publishing Service. Most people don't like the Explode the Code series for a variety of really solid reasons, but the Get Ready, Get Set, and Go for the Code has not only handwriting, but it also has some skills to follow lines, kind of like going through a maze. I don't think kids do enough maze work for their handwriting skills. There's a lot of discernment where there'll be the letter C at the beginning of a line. There's 5 items going across on the rows, and there's a letter C. And then there's a bunch of letters that look kind of like C, and you're supposed to circle the one that is C for visual discrimination. So there's a C, an O, a C, an A, an E, and a C. And so this is really helping a lot of that. And then there's also a group activity where the students listen to the teacher, and there's a whole bunch of pictures on a page. Most of them have C on it. On the page I'm looking at, there's a cow, a cup, a cake, a cat, candle, cat, carrot, and comb. And the instructions will say, draw a person underneath the comb like you're combing their hair, or put a fence around the cow, or draw a line from the cat to the cup so it can drink the milk. And those types of things, I think, just fill in a niche here with the phonemic awareness. There's also a choice. Let's see, uh, writing the letter that starts a picture. So if you've already learned T, there's a toothbrush and a turtle, and you're supposed to write the letter T. There's a monster and a mailman. You're supposed to write the letter M. There's just, there's a letter C in 5 different activities. The last one is a capital C, and going across the row, there's one item, one picture that starts with C. The first item is a C with a diver, a cat, and a sick person in bed. So you want to circle the cat. So those, I think, forward and back, backward and forward items for the get ready for the code, get set for the code, and go for the code have really been filling in a spot in my tutoring. And I want to know what type of curriculum, what curriculum out there for the mainstream schools would fill that gap. Does anybody have ideas?
Well, I did put into the chat the book that was referenced in Next Steps, which is Marilyn Adams' ABC Foundations for Young Children. And that book, which I have, that is a resource that teaches how to write the name of the letter, the actual handwriting formation, along with the sound, and it's teaching the sound from the letter name. So most of the letters, not all, but most, we can either get to the sound by saying it in the beginning, like well, the end comes to mind first, like M, the last part of the letter name says its sound, M, so you learn the sound
Right.
from the name. And T, for example, T, the first sound, the first part of the name helps you know the sound. So she
Okay.
comes from that perspective where you're teaching the phoneme from the actual name of the letter, and then and
Oh.
it's very simplistic. It's not quite as elaborate as what you were describing, but it does the job well, and it's an easy thing to add into if you don't have a really good handwriting curriculum that is going to help you approach that along with the phonemes. It's a nice addition.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, and hi, this is Kim. Just to piggyback a little bit on what Bonnie was saying, in order to automatize the early handwriting, we need an integration of a lot of orthographic codes and phonological codes, the graphomotor codes, but because in order for them to be able to write well, they need to obviously start with being able to build shapes, having that correct pencil grip, holding that paper in the right form, whether they're left-handed or right-handed. And a lot of people do tend to skip over those pieces. And those are super, super important at the beginning of the early writing stage, at least to gain automaticity with writing letters.
Agreed. Knowing how to hold the pencil, the grip, all vitally important. And actually providing daily practice, something as simple as writing, especially when they're in first grade, writing the letter names in lowercase every day, all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way to
Absolutely.
automatize
Yeah,
handwriting.
repetition is key for sure.
Okay. Other comments or thoughts? Well, let's go on to the second question that's talking. We can come back to phonemic awareness. So instruction in Aries reading phases. Which phase do you find the trickiest to work with, either in assessing or teaching? And how might thinking in these terms of the phases help you better match instruction to what you do with your students and what they actually need? And if you need to reference the phases, they begin on, I get there for me. Early in chapter 4, we start to get info on the phases, beginning on page 86. I know that the EL curriculum actually does lean into Aries phases to help define where kids are with their phonics and their phonemic awareness. In fact, I think they might go a little overboard on it, but on the other hand, it is still useful to come, and I like the way it's presented in this book because it's really clear.
I just think as a reading interventionist, just knowing what stage each child is at, especially 3 being fairly new, is helpful for me. So that way I can understand where they're at, and then it's kind of a beginning of where to go with them. So that's very helpful for me.
Yeah, agreed, Lori. Yeah. Other thought, and I can open it up to the chapter as well, if there's thoughts you have on the phonics chapter. In this case, there's a really great overlap because we're starting in the phonemic awareness one to combine the teaching of phonics pretty early, right? By focusing in on blending and segmenting and the handwriting component and getting the kids to understand the letter sounds. That's really pushing us into through the pre-alphabetic phase and into the early alphabetic phase, just through that practice. What you would be doing in that practice is getting us into that early alphabetic phase. For the letter naming assessment that she has on here, I did a little analysis of that. And all 26 letters of the alphabet are represented on that letter naming assessment, which is on page 90. However, not every upper and lower case is presented, but we do have all 26 letters of the alphabet there. There is
I have a quick question about presenting all the letters at once. I find with my students who haven't found success in a lot of different environments that when we introduce C as saying both k and s, they have a hard time code switching. Like right now, I'm tutoring a student who's 12 or 13. She went through the same intervention I'm doing, but she did not do the Barton, which is called Foundations and Sounds. That basement wasn't filled in for her, and it was so apparent. She's so smart. She's doing, middle school and high school online work, but using a lot of adaptive computer help. And of course, we always see that discrepancy between oral responses and being able to write. And she is still having problems code switching open and closed vowels. She is learning how to spell CK in the middle, the K sound in the middle, that we use C first. If there's not an E, I, or Y after it, we use CK after a short vowel, and we use K to save the day when nothing else works. And when I bring to her attention, like the word spoken, she sees a vowel, so she thinks she can put a CK there because she's not automatically noticing that it's an open vowel, even though when we say spoken, that's not even a word that we have trouble with mispronunciation and common usage. And so I'm just wondering which programs and how programs prevent or present all the sounds of letters, how they deal with kids who just have such a difficult time looking at the entire word to determine if it should be long or short, and then how to do these spelling adjustments.
Anyone can jump in. I'll just give my 2 cents. Most of the current programs tend to focus on the dominant sound for the consonants first, so they wouldn't be introducing the k and the s for letter C at the same time. I know Ebley does every sound that a grapheme can make, but they're the exception. Most core resources don't do that. They focus on the dominant sound, and then they focus on the short vowels in kindergarten with exposure to an introduction to some of the long vowel sounds by the end of the school year. The CVC, if you think of the standards and what's listed, actually there's a nice little summary of what's expected to be known on pages 114, 115. That does mirror much of what happens in the most common curricula that are available to us. Not every curriculum focuses on the 6-syllable patterns, but they will teach consonant, vowel, consonant, and of course, open and silent E. They might not actually use the terms of syllable type in the instruction, but the concepts are there. Certainly the same is true with vowel teams, and the adding of the suffix, the most common inflected endings, those are taught as well in K2. Some better than others, some curricula better than others. So, but I did, as I read through what's expected in K1, 2, that does mirror what I saw certainly in evaluating curriculum for the Early Literacy Curriculum Council, held pretty true. Others have comments on that?
I read The Knowledge of English, The Logic of English. And once I read that book, it made everything make sense to me. Because when you teach the kids the rules, it makes sense to them too. If there's a short vowel, it's going to have that CK. If it has a Y or E after the C, it's going to give you that soft C sound. And once I teach that to my kids, it makes a lot more sense. You know, my kids were struggling with, I teach third grade. They were struggling with, why do we change the Y to I? And I explained to them that in English, we don't have words that end with an I. But since we're adding that suffix, it no longer ends with I. So now we can change that Y back to I. You know, once they learn the rules, then everything makes sense to them.
So then if you teach that rule in third grade, is it just permitted that for kindergarten, first and second, they just have some confusion about k in the middle or other rules that aren't yet taught?
I don't know why you wouldn't tell them the rules for that also. You know, you're going to do that constant repetition. But I know if my third graders can get it, and if they've been hearing it throughout the years, you know.
Okay.
Too often we assume that kids are too young to learn something. But what
Sure.
I found is that, you know, if we tell them, you know, we may have to tell them numerous times, but eventually we'll sink in.
Sure. I just sometimes see kids that need so many more repetitions. Most neurotypical people need only 4, 5, 7 repetitions. But when we get into severe dyslexics, they need 20,
Yes.
30, 40. And then the neurotypicals, which maybe make up 75, 80% of the class, they're zooming ahead. And then we've got this 15, 10, 20, depending upon what the occupational environment is and what skills are needed to maintain a livelihood in the area. You know, we've got these kids that are dragging behind. So that's where my heart has always been. But I know I'll be going back into a regular classroom where I do have neurotypical kids. So I'm just trying to figure out how this all meshes in today's world. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you know, with my intervention groups, we'll spend 15 lessons going over CVCs, and these are third graders. And what I've seen is that I had one little girl who she was a special ed student all day, and by the end of a month, she finally was able to spell CVCs. And she was a third grader and couldn't do it before, because every single day we would do those CVC words, just constant repetition. And when I do it, we would go through like, okay, if the word is dog, tell me the sounds you hear in dog. Okay, there's 3 sounds. Okay, spell it out. So every day was always spelling it out. And so by the end of a 15-week course, after end of a 15-day course, she was finally able to do the CVCs. And this is something that she wasn't able to do before. And it was because it was that constant repetition. And whenever we do the decoding, we also do the encoding. So she had to spell it and read it. And that's what really helped. And it was just, you know, the repetition of it, you know, it was boring. It was extremely boring for me, but for them, they were very happy with it, because for the first time they were able to spell these words. And so once they got the CVCs, then you move on to long vowels. That's the long E, and then you go to the vowel blends, and it was a lot. But you know, was she able to get caught up to the rest of my class? Because in my class, at my school site, we are a school without boundaries. And so what that means is that you have to work in the area in order to go to the school. So, they're coming from middle class families, but that doesn't mean that everybody is, a typical kid. I had last year I had 4 kids that were dyslexic but were not diagnosed, and the parents refused any type of assistance with them. So, it was like a struggle to get them to where they had to be. But I've seen it happen in the past to where one little boy, he came in as a non-reader, and as a fifth grader, he's always reading. And it's because of the encoding, the decoding, and the constant repetition.
Julie, thank you so much, Rachel. And you're right, the amount of practice kids need is exponential. Even neurotypical kids need a lot more practice than I think we're we're necessarily providing. I saw some of you turn on your cameras. Was there anyone Julie, did you want to say something? You had your camera on before.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Rachel because she is spot on. The kids who are the strugglers, they want to hear those rules. Like they want some clarity. Like, I don't know when to use this. And then when you tell them that and they get that repeated practice with it, I've had a number of third and fourth grade kids tell me over the years, oh, now I get it. Thanks for telling me how that rule works. Because for a struggler who isn't naturally making those deliberate connections and catching on immediately, this is really a scary time for them because they see their peers catching on so quickly and moving forward, yet they're now starting to realize, you know what? I'm behind. I'm a struggling reader here. And maybe they don't verbalize it externally, but you can see that in their eyes when they're seeing their peers all moving forward and they're not. So anything that we can do to provide more clarity for them in terms of using the English language, I think is just tremendous.
And I think it's also worth recognizing that there's like kind of two categories of kids, some that really need the rule to move forward. They need someone to explain that rule and make it very explicit. And then there's others that need and maybe these are combined, but they need sort of a very clear routine that maintains the language. Like, is there an E at the end of this word? Yes. Does the next morphograph begin with a vowel? Yes. Then what are you going to do? Drop the E and add. They need really consistent cues and routines practiced again and again and again to really retain the rule. And sometimes I don't know if we do that in our instruction. We vary it too much, and it's like that teacher clarity element. How clear can you make this practice, and how frequent can you do it so that it sticks, right? A shout out to Christine. I know that she did the Logic of English with some of the teachers in her building and as a book study, and that was really helpful, especially for the teachers who were in the middle school who had no experience with understanding any of these concepts, and even for the third and fourth grade teachers who have curricular resources but they don't understand quite how to use them. An interesting conversation was that I think there was the belief of, I did the book study, I should know all of this now. But that is not the case. You have to keep coming back to that information again and again and again for it to stick for yourself, right? To make it make sense for the kids.
If I can just add one more thing, this is Bonnie Culla Moreland. I noticed there's some comments about the excellence of Logic of English, and it gives a lot of people an introduction to the rules of English and whatnot. Yet consistently in my community the past 20 years, I have identified people as having children who are dyslexic. And because Logic of English was much less intensive than Barton and less expensive, many friends have chosen that path. And I can think of 2 families within the past year who have come to me where 3-4 years ago I said, gosh, Logic of English seems to have these areas, which I think as a tier 1, it's great, but tier 2 and tier 3, where I think your kid is, they will have trouble. And if you look just in Facebook forums, Logic of English didn't work for me. A lot of times Logic of English will help very highly intelligent students kind of continue on until they do hit that third, fourth grade wall. So if there is universal screening for a very sensitive universal screening for dyslexia in kindergarten and kindergarten to the first month of first grade, I think Logic of English is fantastic, but there are so many really intelligent kids who won't reach their potential by junior high or high school, which is where these kids are failing. Like my youngest little girl, she won't have a playmate in class with her in sixth grade because she's being held back. She has an August birthday, but she is being held back because she has moved to Barton because Logic of English just had that Logic of English wall hit that I've seen consistently, and you can find it on Facebook pages. So without excellent universal screening at the beginning, highly intelligent people will not reach their potential by junior high and high school with Logic of English.
I think Bonnie, I appreciate your comment. And there is a curriculum that Denise Ide made called The Logic of English. What we're referring to is the book, the resource that I have an image up on the screen, which is, a little skinny book that actually is for teachers and for educators to understand the details behind the English language. The curriculum is the curriculum, and I have no doubt that but I will also share that there is no perfect curriculum. So you have to be smarter than your resource, and you have to be able to recognize where the hole is and what kids are struggling with, and then adjust the resource. So not, just pointing that out, like there is no magic bullet on the resources, and the Logic of English is as good or as not good as any other one that's out there. But just to draw the distinction again, we were really talking about this book and not necessarily the curriculum. Okay.
Yes, I have the book that goes with that book, Sounding Out the Sight Words, which is also written by Denise.
Yep.
And it goes very well together, and it tells you in the, I think it's a spiral book. It's the spiral one. It's long, and it'll tell you where in the logic book you can find that particular word to learn more about it.
Okay.
So it's actually been very, very user friendly, and it helps me teach the kids why sight word is written the way it's spelled the way it's spelled.
Awesome. Thank
So
you.
it's actually really good.
Okay, so we are coming up on a few minutes left on our time together, and I did want to get to the third question, which is all about the activities and the things that are included for practice. So as you think of your own students, where do you see a mismatch between what the book suggests and what you're currently doing? Are there any small shifts you could try to make to your PA or phonics teaching, which would allow you to be more targeted or effective? And this is where you could lean into some of those exercises that are shared in both chapters, or just open it up to.
I actually did some of those activities. So we do U-Fly at one of my schools, and then my job is to do a double dip. So some of those activities are great, and the kids love them. And they enjoy doing it. So that way, it's not only reteaching what they did for U-Fly, but maybe do it a different way to make it engaging for them. So some of those that I've tried, the one where the head waist folds was a really great one. So I really enjoyed them. And then I know at one of our meetings that we went to, from the interventionist said that they want to use those for parent night. So I could kind of see using them for parent nights as well.
Thanks, Lori. Yes, agreed on all points. There are definitely some strong activities here that help build phonics knowledge and PA knowledge. And I'm glad that you're using them from parent night as well. That's good to hear. Kim, can you share again the name of the book that you mentioned that goes along with Logic of English?
Sounding Out Words.
Sounding Out Words. Thank you.
Yes. And I actually purchased it through eBay for $20. Sounding Out the Sight Words. Sorry, that's what it's called. Sounding Out the Sight Words.
Yeah, I've heard of that one. Okay. Other comments on actually, we haven't talked about decodable text at all. We can talk about decodable text, or if you have other thoughts on the activities that you've tried from the book or similar ones.
I was just going to say, so I'm our district reading specialist. We're really small, so I do intervention as well. So this year we're making a shift where I'm also going to be doing small groups within the classroom. And so I think of how many things on our list of like trainings that we need to do. And I would love to do this book as one of the trainings, but I'm excited to use these activities in the classroom so that I'm not directly teaching the teacher how to use it, but they're kind of seeing me use it, and then they can potentially take those activities and then use them for themselves too. So it's that inadvertently teaching through this book, because there's so many good things, but it's like, when do you find the time on all the other lists of things that you need to accomplish throughout the year? So I'm excited to use those different activities within our K-5 classrooms.
Christina, that resonates with me. When I was a reading specialist in my former district, I had the first edition of this book, and I would bring it with me to PLC meetings with grade level teachers. And, usually they tell you what they want to talk about. So I would find a spot in the book that helped me explain something. And then we would use a practice activity or an assessment. And that was from the first edition. This edition is even stronger. I want to just point at pages 94, 95. One of the things that I love about the ABC arc that they have here is that there's a time frame. What does mastery look like if you're doing an ABC arc? Initially it should take 5 minutes for the kids to match up the magnetic letter to the image, and then eventually, when there is no just the guidepost, the 4 letters that are guideposts, it should take them less than 2 minutes to move the that in and of itself is powerful for teachers to know. How long should I spend on this? When are we done with this activity and we can move on? So that's just one example of the little details that are in this book that can help target what instruction needs to happen to move a group forward or a child forward. Other comments? Practicing my good wait time. I know you have things you want to share.
Amy, we have something in the chat from Amy Anderson. I'm excited to use these activities. They will support my students as they learn.
Thank you. Agreed.
I'll just comment a little bit on teaching morphology. I think that from what I have encountered, a lot of teachers are scared of morphology, and they don't really maybe understand morphology. You're teaching it when you add that S to make a plural, and just those little baby steps that they are really teaching morphology, and how important that is for students to understand what those morphemes are. So I just going to give a shout out that it talked about teaching morphology as phonics instruction as well.
Yes, and starting little, right? Because we end up using those common suffixes that kids, the ed, the past tense one being the number one, in the ing. That's a great place to begin. Agreed. Thank you so much, Melissa. Yeah, I agree, Rachel, with the 6 syllable types plus assessment, that especially for grades 3, 4, and 5, or grades 2 through 5, figuring out where kids are with their syllable knowledge and their ability to quickly read 1, 2, 3 syllable words. Great assessment. Target your instruction. And then there's details about, even when you're giving the test, write down what the kids say, like, as those of you that are supporting other teachers or for yourself, what they do when they make the error is as important as the error itself, right? Because it gives you insights on what to fix, what to address instructionally. So we're coming up to the end here. The big reflections from the chapter. We talked about combining PA with handwriting and letter ID. Get to the stuff, skip the fluff, as I quoted Anita Archer. Over practice the skills, both in whole group and small group, and get a lot of group responses. We didn't talk about that quite enough, like a lot of whole group responses. Correct immediately, immediate corrective feedback. Use our assessments to inform instruction. Look for ways to add in more practice throughout your day. There's some great transition activities included in the book. And then there's a wonderful definition of intense, explicit, systematic instruction, ideally starting with those continuous sounds. So did we meet our learning targets? Have we embraced, it did sound to me like you're embracing those new ideas about effective phoneme awareness instruction, understanding the progression of PA skills, leveraging Aries phases of word recognition, and identifying some practice activities that will extend. And think about that one change you can make in your instruction and what your kids need, and chase after that. Doesn't have to be everything all at once. What's the one change? The next time we come back together will be July 12th for the fluency chapter. We hope to see you there. It's a great continuation because what we're doing is really in chapters 2, 3, and 4, getting to that skill level and trying to build explicit, systematic instruction that gets them to be automatic in their ability to sound out words and say them. So the fluency chapter is a logical next step. Where do we go once they have some skills and we want to bring them to automaticity? We hope to see you on July 12th. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. This video will be posted today sometime, hopefully, or by tomorrow at the latest. So you can share it with colleagues. Thank you so much for this fantastic discussion. And the times we have left, is there anything anyone else wants to add? Just a few minutes left. Use the resource, right? Keep going. Thank you so much for being here this morning. We really appreciated your time on a Saturday morning to join us for this book study. And we hope to see you on the 12th. Have a wonderful 4th. Yes. Enjoy the 4th of July. Thanks, Jeanette, for being here too.
No problem, Amy. Great session.